The Silent Watcher. The mansion of Ethan Cross had always stood as a fortress of opulence, a palace that seemed untouchable by ordinary troubles, but in the past few weeks it had become a house of dread. Ethan Cross, a billionaire known not only for his empire of technology and investments but also for his boundless energy, sharp wit, and relentless drive, now lay in his private suite like a shadow of the man he once was. His once booming voice that could fill auditoriums was silenced by weakness, and his sharp eyes that once scanned opportunities like a hawk now stared emptily at the ceiling as though clouded by an unseen fog. The richest man in the city, who could command armies of lawyers, engineers, and strategists, now relied on machines to keep his body steady. In desperation, his board and family had summoned 15 of the finest doctors from across the world, experts in rare diseases, metabolic disorders, cardiology, neurology, and toxicology, all clustered together under one roof in the hope that their combined brilliance could rescue him. For 2 weeks, those 15 minds had battled like generals in a war they did not understand. One day, a neurologist declared it must be a degenerative brain disorder. The next day, a cardiologist insisted it was a rare form of heart muscle weakness. Lab results were ordered, scans were run, biopsies were taken, and yet each answer only seemed to breed more confusion. The billionaire's body did not respond to their treatments. Every solution seemed to backfire. His decline was steady, terrifying, and unexplainable. They treated his fever, but it returned worse. They calmed his heart rhythm, only to watch his blood pressure collapse. They worked tirelessly, but the harder they pushed, the more resistance his body gave. Each evening, after hours of sterile debates, the doctors left the suite exhausted, their crisp confidence replaced by whispered frustrations and doubtful glances at one another. They had come as lions, and each passing night reduced them to frightened men and women circling a mystery too deep to grasp. In the middle of this storm stood Maya Williams, the housekeeper whose presence most of them overlooked entirely. She had worked in Ethan Cross's estate for 7 years, a silent figure who ensured the glass tables gleamed, the marble floors sparkled, and the endless stream of linens were laundered and folded. She walked softly, carrying her mop, her cart, and her keys, and to the grand eyes of physicians and executives she was as invisible as the wallpaper. Yet Maya noticed everything. She noticed the subtle tension between Dr. Walden and Dr. Singh whenever Ethan's vitals crashed. She noticed the way nurses exchanged anxious glances when medications were adjusted with little effect. She noticed that the great men of medicine avoided speaking directly of failure, but carried it in their shoulders, in their sighs, in the way their hands lingered too long over charts without answers. Maya's world had once been different. Before life's storms rerouted her, she had walked lecture halls as a promising chemistry student, 2 semesters away from graduation when her parents were taken in a car accident, leaving her with 2 siblings to raise. Overnight, her world of formulas and lab coats turned into bills, double shifts, and survival. She had traded textbooks for mops, experiments for paychecks, and the pursuit of science for the responsibility of family. Yet knowledge never dies. It sleeps. And in the long, silent nights of cleaning, knowledge had stirred quietly inside her, waiting for a moment when it might matter again. Now, as she wiped counters and folded sheets in Ethan's private suite, her eyes never truly rested on her tasks. They darted to the monitors, to the patterns of decline, to the subtle changes in his skin, his hair, his nails. She began to notice that Ethan's body told a story the doctors were not hearing. His fingernails carried pale lines that deepened each day. His once thick hair seemed to thin in odd patches, more on one side than the other. He drifted into confusion at night, mistaking his sister for his late wife, speaking of business partners who hadn't visited in years. Yet, when she overheard doctors, they debated high-level theories, autoimmune cascades, mitochondrial collapse, rare virus strains. All brilliant, all elegant, but none matched what her eyes had seen daily with quiet precision. The longer she watched, the more the truth pressed upon her heart. They were treating the symptoms, not the cause. She thought it 100 times before. The day came when the words finally escaped her lips. It was an evening heavy with tension. Ethan's vitals had dipped alarmingly, and the 15 physicians huddled around his bed like architects surveying a crumbling tower. Dr. Walden flipped through charts with an expression of stone. Dr. Singh muttered about revising medication dosages. Dr. Halford leaned against the counter with arms crossed, his lips drawn tight, and in that thick silence Maya's voice cut through, quiet yet piercing. "You're treating the symptoms, not the cause." The room froze. The hum of machines and the hiss of oxygen filled the gap. One by one, heads turned toward her. She stood with her mop handle in hand, gloves damp from cleaning, her posture steady though her heart pounded. Walden's brows rose sharply. "What did you say?" His voice carried the clipped authority of a man unaccustomed to being questioned, especially not by someone beneath his notice. Maya tightened her grip on the mop, her palms slick, but her voice did not falter this time. "I said, you're treating the symptoms, not the cause." A ripple of disbelief spread across the room. Dr. Madsen let out a short laugh and leaned back with a smirk. "That's a bold statement from someone holding a mop." The young residents chuckled, emboldened by his mockery. "Careful," Dr. Halford added dryly. "She might publish her findings in Janitorial Medical Monthly." Laughter echoed faintly, dismissive and sharp, but Maya stood her ground. She had seen their brilliance unravel into guessing. Their expertise circled the problem without landing on truth, and she could not stay silent anymore. Her gaze swept over them, resting finally on Ethan Cross, who lay beneath his oxygen mask, shrinking, helpless. Her voice softened, but its conviction deepened. "I've seen you all guessing. You don't know what's wrong with him. Someone needs to." The words hung heavy, unwelcomed and dangerous. Walden's jaw clenched as he stepped forward. "Miss Williams," he said evenly, "this is not your concern. Please return to your duties." Another doctor muttered that she was overstepping, another that she should be removed. But Maya had already turned, her eyes lingering one last time on the billionaire who had inspired millions with his relentless vision. She left without waiting for their reply, but inside her the fire had been lit. Out in the hallway, her footsteps slowed, her breath shallow, her mind racing. She pushed her cart to a quiet corner and pulled out the clipboard she wasn't supposed to have, the one where she had secretly documented Ethan's symptoms for days. She flipped to the latest page, her notes precise in cramped handwriting. Fingernail lines deepening, hair thinning more on left side, confusion episodes increasing, new hand cream used before each decline. She circled the last line twice, underlined it with force. The jar of imported black cream on Ethan's nightstand, always replenished by his close associate Jefferson Hale, had accompanied each crash in health. The doctors hadn't noticed, but she had. As she stared at her notes, memories of her studies stirred violently within her. She remembered chemistry lectures on heavy metal exposure, on toxins absorbed through the skin, on the insidious way certain elements disguise themselves in the body until it was too late. One name screamed in her mind: thallium. Symptoms: neuropathy, confusion, hair loss, digestive breakdown. Exactly what she had observed. Her chest tightened as she realized the gravity. This wasn't illness. It was poisoning. And the world's brightest doctors were blind to it. Maya's jaw set in grim determination. She had no lab, no degree on the wall, no authority to speak. But she had eyes, memory, and the courage to follow the truth others ignored. That night, as the hospital dimmed into quiet hours and the doctors retired to their quarters, Maya moved, like a shadow. At 2:30 a.m., when the halls were hushed and the nurses weary, She entered Ethan's suite with her cart, her steps calm, unhurried. The billionaire lay still, pale and shrunken. His machine's 15 doctors might have missed it, but she wouldn't. She couldn't. Not now, not when Ethan Cross's life still clung to a fragile thread. And so the invisible housekeeper, dismissed and mocked, stood at the edge of a decision that would change everything. She had no allies, no authority, no safety. But she had the truth and the courage to follow it into the storm. The whisper of doubt. The storm outside Ethan Cross's estate mirrored the storm within. Each day seemed to bring darker skies, heavier rain, and deeper despair. The doctors who had arrived in sleek black cars with suitcases of research and confidence now dragged themselves through the halls like weary soldiers. Their once crisp lab coats were wrinkled, their polished words dulled by frustration. They argued in hushed tones, snapping at one another in moments of weakness, their egos cracking under the weight of failure. For all their brilliance, Ethan continued to fade. His skin turned ashen, his voice weakened into murmurs, and his body wasted away. The 15 doctors, the best of the best, were losing ground, and they knew it. Maya watched this unraveling with the quiet patience of someone used to being ignored. Every day, as she pushed her cleaning cart through the corridors, she listened. The doctors believed their voices carried only within their inner circle, but their whispered debates echoed through the marble hallways. She heard one doctor mutter that they were simply prolonging the inevitable. Another whispered about consulting palliative specialists as though preparing for the end. She watched the younger residents flinch at these words, glancing at the billionaire's frail body as though already mourning, and through it all, Ethan Cross remained silent, his once indomitable spirit reduced to shallow breaths and restless dreams. But Maya's silence was not the same as theirs. Hers was an active silence, filled with thought and observation. She began to see patterns others dismissed. Each night she recorded Ethan's changes, his hair thinning unevenly, his confusion peaking after certain visits, the subtle tremors in his hands that no one else seemed to acknowledge. She noted the timing, the sequence, the rise and fall of symptoms as though mapping out a secret rhythm. The more she wrote, the clearer it became. This was not the chaos of disease. It was the consistency of cause and effect. Something external, something deliberate, was pulling Ethan down. Yet the fear of speaking lingered in her chest like a weight. Her outburst days before, "You're treating the symptoms, not the cause," had marked her as an intruder in the doctor's realm. Their laughter still echoed in her mind, sharp and belittling. She remembered the smirk of Dr. Madsen, the mocking words about Janitorial Medical Monthly. They had dismissed her, and worse, they had noticed her. For years she had existed, in their periphery, invisible, unremarkable. But now, by daring to speak, she had stepped into the light, and the light could be dangerous. Still, the truth pressed upon her too heavily to ignore. Her resolve deepened one evening when she overheard Dr. Walden himself, the stoic leader of the medical team, admitting quietly to a colleague, "We're grasping at shadows. Nothing fits." That confession, whispered in frustration, confirmed everything Maya already knew. They had no answers. If she stayed silent, Ethan would die. And so, despite the fear, despite the risk, she returned again to her forbidden notes, to her stolen observations, and to the jar of imported cream that had become the center of her suspicion. The cream itself seemed innocent, luxurious even. Black glass jar, embossed with silver letters, always delivered by Jefferson Hale, Ethan's longtime associate. Hale arrived at the estate often, wearing suits tailored to perfection, his smile warm, his tone polite. To the world, he was Ethan's closest confidant, the man who had stood beside him during decades of business battles. But to Maya, he was a shadow figure, always appearing just before Ethan's health spiraled downward. The pattern was too sharp, too precise to ignore. And though she had no proof yet, the fire in her chest told her she was right. Her decision to act grew stronger when she saw Ethan one night during her late shift. The suite was quiet, the monitors glowing in the dim light. Maya paused her cleaning to glance at the man who had once been larger than life. His body, now frail, seemed swallowed by the massive bed. His hand, resting limply by his side, bore faint tremors. She felt a surge of anger, not at him, not at his fragility, but at the arrogance of those who claimed to heal yet failed to see. "They've stopped fighting for you," she whispered under her breath, though no one else was there to hear. "But I haven't." The next morning, she drove to the water treatment lab on the outskirts of town where Walter Haynes worked. Walter was a man in his late 60s, with graying hair and eyes that carried both kindness and fatigue. He had known Maya's father, had mentored him in science decades earlier. When Maya approached him with the vial, her hands trembling, Walter's brow furrowed. "Where did you get this?" he asked, suspicion in his voice. "From his room," Maya admitted softly. "Can you check for thallium?" The word hung in the air like a bomb. Walter studied her face, searching for any sign of foolishness or paranoia, but found only steady determination. At last, he nodded. "I'll run it today. No promises, Maya. Just the truth." Her voice was firm. "That's all I want." As she left the lab, fear and hope collided within her. She had crossed a line that could not be undone. If she was wrong, she would be dismissed, ridiculed, maybe even fired. But if she was right, if thallium was in that cream, then Ethan Cross's life depended on her. Hours later, as she returned to her modest apartment and collapsed into bed, her phone buzzed. It was Walter. 3 words appeared on the screen. "Call me, urgent." Her hands shook as she dialed his number. When his voice came through, it was low and grave. "Maya," he said, "you weren't wrong. Trace amounts of thallium, enough to accumulate, enough to kill." Her breath caught in her throat. For a moment, she could not speak. Walter continued. "If he's been exposed consistently, he's in critical danger. This is deliberate. Someone is trying to end his life." The words were confirmation of everything she feared, but hearing them out loud made her knees weak. She clutched the edge of her bed as though steadying herself against the force of truth. "What do I do?" she whispered. Walter's pause was heavy. "You need to report this, officially, to the hospital board, the police, someone. If he's still being exposed, time is running out." But Maya shook her head even though he couldn't see her. "They won't listen. They barely let me stand in the room." Walter sighed. "Then you need someone who will. But be careful. If you're right, whoever is behind this won't want you talking." That night, sleep evaded her entirely. She stared at the ceiling, replaying every glance, every smirk, every dismissive laugh from the doctors. They hadn't believed her when she warned them of the obvious. Why would they listen now? Worse, if Jefferson Hale truly was orchestrating this poisoning, he was powerful, connected, untouchable. Who would stand beside a housekeeper against a man like him? Yet, as she turned her eyes toward the photo of her daughter Leah on the nightstand, she felt her resolve harden. This was not just about Ethan Cross anymore. This was about truth itself, about proving that voices without titles could still carry weight, about showing her daughter that courage mattered even when the world told you to stay quiet. The following evening, as Maya walked into the mansion for her shift, the weight of her secret pressed heavily on her shoulders. She passed Jefferson Hale in the hallway. He smiled at her, polite as ever. But this time Maya caught something behind the smile. Calculation, coldness, like a man playing a game of chess. Her pulse quickened. Did he already suspect that she knew? Did he sense the shift in her gaze? She forced herself to return the smile with practiced neutrality, but inside her chest thundered with fear. Later that night, as she wheeled her cart past Ethan's suite, She noticed another jar of the same black cream on the nightstand. Her stomach twisted. They were still applying it, still feeding the poison. She clenched her fists and whispered to herself, "Not for much longer." In that moment, Maya Williams understood fully that she was no longer just a silent housekeeper. She was standing at the threshold of a battle, one that pitted her against wealth, power, arrogance, and danger. The doctors had failed, blinded by pride. The poisoner moved freely, cloaked by trust. But Maya had seen what they had missed, and she carried the truth inside her like a flame. She knew now that her journey was only beginning. The hidden poison. The following days inside Ethan Cross's mansion carried an air of suffocating tension, as though the walls themselves had begun to absorb the weight of secrets. Every hallway hummed with whispered arguments between doctors. Every nurse moved with a nervous urgency, and the billionaire's suite had transformed into a battlefield of machines, wires, and medical jargon that seemed more desperate than hopeful. The great minds that had once carried reputations like armor now looked fractured, restless, and fatigued. They had tried every method their training dictated, every treatment their research suggested, but the steady decline of Ethan's body had rendered their brilliance hollow. In hushed tones, some even began to discuss preparing the family for the worst. To outsiders, it was a portrait of inevitability. To Maya, who pushed her cart silently through those same corridors, it was a crime unfolding in plain sight. Her nights were now filled with a dual rhythm, the routine motions of cleaning that made her invisible, and the quiet urgency of investigation that made her dangerous. She still mopped the marble floors and polished the glass railings, but her eyes were never still. They moved across every detail in Ethan's room, the tremor in his fingers when Hale visited, the faint metallic smell she swore clung to the cream, the subtle worsening of confusion after the lotion was applied to his skin. Each observation only reinforced the truth that Walter had already confirmed. Thallium was poisoning Ethan Cross, drip by drip, under the guise of care. And yet knowledge without proof was fragile. The doctors had dismissed her once. They would dismiss her again unless she placed undeniable evidence before them. That understanding became her obsession. The clipboard she kept hidden beneath cleaning supplies grew heavier each day with notes, times, and cross-references. She no longer merely wrote down symptoms. She charted them like a scientist, comparing the exact hour Ethan's vitals dipped with the exact hour Hale arrived. She circled, underlined, and highlighted until the pages themselves seemed to pulse with a pattern no one else dared to see. Still, a voice inside her whispered that notes weren't enough. She needed more. The chance arrived on a night when the mansion's private security grew lax, lulled by the routine of long shifts. Hale had visited earlier that afternoon, leaving behind yet another jar of the infamous cream, identical to the last. Maya, hidden behind her cart, had watched carefully, as a nurse applied it to Ethan's arms and hands, oblivious to the danger. Hours later, Ethan had slipped into a deeper confusion, his heart monitor faltering briefly before stabilizing again. The evidence was repeating itself, and Maya knew she could no longer delay. At precisely 2:17 a.m., when the corridors settled into their eerie hush, she returned to Ethan's room. The billionaire lay unconscious, his breathing shallow, his body so frail it seemed the bed might swallow him whole. Machines beeped with quiet persistence, as though reminding the world that life still clung stubbornly to him. Maya's gaze locked on the nightstand. The black jar sat there, innocent and menacing all at once. She slipped on gloves, opened her cart's bottom compartment, and withdrew another vial. Her hands moved with precision, dipping a sterile swab into the cream, and sealing it quickly just as she had done before. But this time, she didn't stop. She reached into the drawer beneath the nightstand where the older jar had been kept. Sliding it into her cart with careful ease, she concealed it beneath stacks of linen. She now had 2 samples, one to prove consistency, the other to confirm dosage. Her heart pounded as she wheeled her cart back down the hallway, every squeak of its wheels sounding to her like a siren. When she reached the janitor's closet, she closed the door behind her and leaned against it, her breath ragged. She stared at the stolen jar, black glass glinting under the harsh fluorescent light, and whispered to herself, "You're not invisible anymore, Maya. You're holding the truth." The next morning, she drove again to Walter's lab. He met her at the back entrance, his limp slowing his steps but not his urgency. When she handed him the second vial in the jar, his expression darkened. "You're playing a dangerous game," he warned quietly. "If someone is behind this, they'll notice what's missing." Maya's eyes burned with determination. "Then let them notice. Just tell me what's in it." Walter nodded, his jaw tight. "I'll run the test tonight, but Maya, be careful. Some truths don't just make enemies, they make powerful ones." By evening, Maya was back at the mansion, exhaustion gripping her body but her mind burning with focus. She pushed her cart through the halls as though nothing had changed, but every movement carried the tension of a secret war. When she entered the break room, she noticed something unusual. A folded piece of paper tucked beneath her cleaning checklist. She opened it, her hands trembling, and read the words written in block letters. "Stop asking questions. Stay in your lane." Her chest tightened, her breath catching. Someone knew. Someone was watching her closer than she realized. Fear clawed at her, but she folded the note calmly, slipped it into her pocket, and resumed her duties with practiced composure. Inside, however, her thoughts raced. The enemy wasn't just Hale. It was the silence of the institution itself, the people who preferred to turn away rather than confront what was unfolding. The doctors were bound by arrogance. The staff was bound by fear. But Maya had nothing left to lose but the truth. When her shift ended, she didn't drive home. Instead, she went to the basement archives of the mansion, a place most staff never visited. The air was musty, the fluorescent lights flickered, and shelves of dusty records stretched endlessly. She searched until she found the file marked Cross, Ethan. Flipping through pages, her eyes narrowed as she saw Hale's name again and again. Deliveries signed by him, product substitutions authorized, skincare products listed as medical supplies. The pattern was glaring. She pulled out her phone and snapped photo after photo. Each click of the shutter felt like a nail hammered into the coffin of secrecy. But even armed with evidence, she knew she could not fight this battle alone. That night, she thought of Aaron, a nurse she trusted, one of the few who had once whispered to Maya about her own frustrations with the system, about a patient misdiagnosed and the retaliation she feared if she spoke. If anyone would understand, it was Aaron. The next day, Maya met her at a quiet diner near the hospital. The rain drummed against the windows as the two women leaned close across the table. Maya slid her phone across, showing Aaron the photos of records and her notes. Aaron's brow furrowed, her face paling as she scrolled. "Maya," she whispered, "this is serious. You're saying he's being poisoned." Maya's voice was steady. "Yes, and Hale is behind it." Aaron sat back, her hands trembling slightly around her coffee cup. This could cost us everything. But if what you're saying is true, then we can't stay quiet." She paused, then nodded slowly. "I know someone in toxicology. If we can get Ethan's blood and skin tested quietly, we can confirm this without tipping anyone off. If we get proof, undeniable proof, they'll have no choice but to listen." Maya's eyes locked with hers, fierce and determined. "Can you trust them?" Aaron swallowed hard, then nodded. "If it's about saving a man's life, yes." That night, Maya returned to the mansion with renewed resolve. She slipped through the halls like a shadow, her cart rattling softly, her eyes sharp. She knew the risks had doubled, perhaps tripled. Someone had left her a warning. Someone had noticed her digging. and danger now lurked in every corner. But she also knew something else. She was no longer alone. For the first time since this battle began, she had an ally inside. The silence that had once made her invisible now became her greatest weapon. And as she cleaned the glass doors of Ethan's suite, glancing at the frail billionaire who hovered at the edge of life, she whispered to herself, "They don't see it yet. But the truth is coming, and when it does, nothing will hide them. The storm of resistance." The mansion was no longer just a house of sickness. It had become a battlefield of silence and hidden agendas. The 15 doctors, once united in prestige, now fragmented under pressure. Their arguments grew sharper, their confidence thinner, their treatments more frantic. Ethan Cross remained trapped in his bed, each day weaker than the last, his body failing while machines hummed their lonely songs. On the surface, the scene looked like tragedy. Beneath it, Maya. Williams now understood it was treachery. The doctors might have been blind, but she could see. And what she saw was not just incompetence, it was deliberate poisoning. Disguised one evening, as she returned to her shift, she noticed the air in the hallway felt heavier. Doctors stood in clusters, their voices lowered, their eyes shifting toward her more often than usual. Maya kept her expression neutral, but inside her chest, unease grew. Word had spread, not of the truth she carried, but of suspicion around her presence. She remembered the folded note tucked under her checklist. Stop asking questions. Stay in your lane. Now she felt its shadow in every glance, every pause in conversation when she entered the room. The mansion's staff had always overlooked her. Now they were watching her. Her fears became reality later that night when Dr. Walden himself approached her in the corridor. His voice was calm, but edged with warning. "Miss Williams," he said, his tall frame blocking the light. "I understand. You've been taking an unusual interest in matters outside your duties." Maya's grip tightened on her cart, her mind racing for words. She forced her voice steady. "I only care that Mr. Cross gets better." Walden's eyes narrowed, his jaw clenched. "Your responsibilities are to cleaning, not to medicine. I suggest you remember that, for your own sake." His tone was not angry. It was colder than that, the kind of tone meant to shut doors, permanently. She nodded politely as though cowed, but inside her resolve only hardened. The resistance was no longer subtle. They wanted her silenced, whether by dismissal or intimidation, and yet the truth refused to let her rest. Later that night, in the linen closet where Erin left her secret notes, she found a small slip of paper scrawled in hurried handwriting. Sample taken. Results tomorrow. Stay ready. Maya's chest tightened. This was it. If the test confirmed what she already knew, the war would move from whispers into open confrontation. The next day passed with unbearable slowness. Maya moved through her tasks, like a ghost, her mind replaying every possibility. What if the tests were intercepted? What if Erin was discovered? What if Hale already knew they were closing in on him? By the time her phone buzzed with Erin's message, she was shaking. The text read, "Confirmed. Thallium in blood. High levels. Fatal if continued." Maya sat down heavily on the edge of her bed, her hand over her mouth, tears pricking her eyes. The doctors had failed. The system had failed. But she, a housekeeper, had uncovered the truth that could save Ethan Cross's life. But triumph was quickly swallowed by fear. How would she reveal this without being crushed? She imagined, standing before the 15 doctors, presenting her notes and the results. She imagined their laughter, their dismissal, their accusations of meddling. She imagined Hale's cold smile, the power he wielded, the subtle threats that already lingered. Around her, she was David, standing before an army of Goliaths, armed only with conviction. Yet David had won before, and she could too. That evening, Maya took a bold step. As the doctors gathered around Ethan's bed for their nightly review, she lingered, longer than usual with her cart, deliberately wiping the same counter as though waiting for her moment. When Dr. Walden concluded his grim update, "His condition is worsening, despite our interventions," Maya spoke, her voice steady, though her hands trembled. "He's not sick. He's being poisoned." The room fell into silence. Every eye turned toward her. Dr. Singh frowned deeply. "Excuse me?" Maya met his gaze without flinching. "You've been treating him for illnesses that don't exist. The thallium in his blood is killing him." She pulled a folded sheet from her apron, a copy of the toxicology report Aaron had slipped to her, and placed it on the counter. "You missed it, but it's there." The silence broke like glass. Dr. Madsen let out a scoff. "This is absurd. Where would a housekeeper even get a toxicology report?" Another added sharply, "This is a violation of confidentiality. She should be removed immediately." Walden picked up the paper, his expression unreadable as he scanned the numbers. For a moment, doubt flickered across his face. But then his authority returned, cold and dismissive. "This is not admissible evidence, unauthorized, unverified. Miss Williams, you've crossed a dangerous line." Maya's heart pounded, but she did not back down. "You can dismiss me, you can throw me out, but if you don't test him yourselves, officially, he will die, and his blood will prove I was right." Her words rang with conviction, cutting through their arrogance like a blade. For the first time, some of the younger doctors shifted, uncomfortably, their certainty cracking. Walden glared at her, but even he could not ignore the truth entirely. At last, he spoke tightly. "We'll order tests, but if this proves false, Miss Williams, you will answer for it." That night, as Maya walked back to the staff quarters, fear and triumph mingled within her. The tests were in motion now. If they confirmed thallium, the fortress of denial would finally crumble. But she knew Hale would not wait quietly for that moment. He would strike back, and soon. Her prediction came faster than she expected. In the early hours of morning, as she left the mansion after her shift, she found her car door ajar. Inside, her glove compartment was open, her papers scattered. On the driver's seat lay a single black jar of cream, its lid unscrewed, a smear of its contents across the upholstery. No note this time, no subtle warning, just a clear message. "We know. And you're next." Maya stood frozen in the cold dawn, the reality pressing down on her. The storm was no longer brewing. It had arrived, and she was standing at its very center. The battle for truth. The mansion that once represented wealth and security now felt like a fortress of secrets closing in on Maya from every side. The air carried a tension so thick it was nearly tangible. The 15 doctors continued their rituals of medicine, ordering scans, debating theories, prescribing adjustments, but beneath their clinical routines ran an undercurrent of unease. They had seen the toxicology numbers she presented, and, though many still dismissed her as meddlesome, doubt had been planted in their minds. It was a dangerous shift, and Maya could feel it in the way their glances lingered longer, in the whispers that cut off when she entered a room, in the sense that the walls themselves were waiting for something to crack. Ethan Cross's condition grew worse. His skin had taken on a pallor that seemed unnatural, his body wasting so quickly it was as though invisible hands pulled him downward. The machines that surrounded his bed worked tirelessly, keeping his fragile life tethered to the present. He was no longer conscious enough to speak, no longer strong enough to show any trace of the man who had once commanded boardrooms and audiences. The billionaire who had built an empire was now a ghost clinging to existence. For Maya, every flicker on his monitors was a reminder of the urgency. If she failed now, if she faltered even once, he would not survive. The official blood test was ordered, as Walden had promised in his dismissive tone. But Maya knew better than to trust that the system would protect the truth. She had already seen how easily evidence could vanish, how quickly doubts could be buried under the weight of authority. The report might come back altered. The results might be inconclusive. Or worse, the test might be delayed long enough for Ethan to die before anything definitive could be said. She could not simply wait. Waiting would mean death. It was Aaron who brought her the first sign that the storm was deepening. They met in the staff cafeteria late one night, both pretending to refill their coffee cups, both careful not to linger too close. Aaron's face was pale, her voice low. "Maya, someone knows. They were asking me questions this morning about my lab connections, about whether I had been running any unauthorized tests. I denied it, but—" Her voice trailed off, her fear speaking louder than her words. Maya placed a hand over Aaron's, her own fear buried beneath the steel of resolve. "Then we'll be more careful, but we don't stop. Not now." Yet, even as she spoke the words, Maya felt the pressure mounting. That same evening, she found her locker in the staff quarters broken open. Inside, her hidden clipboard, the one filled with weeks of notes, was gone. In its place sat a single folded paper. "You can't win." The message was plain. The threat undeniable. For a moment she sat on the bench, her head in her hands, the weight of hopelessness pressing down. They had taken her records, her meticulous proof. Without them, she was just a housekeeper again. Her words powerless against the credentials of 15 doctors and the influence of Jefferson Hale. But her quiet rebellion did not go unnoticed. Jefferson Hale cornered her one evening as she exited Ethan's suite. He leaned casually against the doorframe, his smile smooth but his eyes like daggers. "You've taken quite an interest in things. Far above your pay grade," he said softly, his tone almost friendly. Maya kept her expression calm, her hands steady even though her pulse raced. "I care about Mr. Cross," she answered evenly. Hale's smile widened, but the cold calculation in his eyes deepened. Care is admirable, but sometimes care becomes interference, and interference has consequences. His words lingered, like poison in the air as he stepped aside, allowing her to pass. That night, Maya barely slept. Every creak of her apartment walls felt like a warning. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. She thought of her daughter Leah, sleeping peacefully in the next room, unaware of the storm gathering around her mother. Fear whispered that she should stop, that she should walk away before Hale's influence crushed her completely. But then, she remembered Ethan's face, gaunt, lifeless, betrayed by those who were meant to save him. She remembered her father's voice. Truth doesn't need a title to be right, and she knew, with unwavering certainty, that silence would be the greater betrayal. The next evening brought the moment she had both dreaded and awaited. Walden called a meeting in Ethan's suite, gathering all 15 doctors, several senior nurses, and members of Ethan's family. Maya lingered at the back of the room with her cart, unnoticed as usual. Walden cleared his throat and announced, "The results of Mr. Cross's toxicology report have arrived." A hush fell. Maya's heart pounded as she gripped the handle of her cart. Walden continued, "The findings are inconclusive. No clear evidence of toxins." Maya's breath caught. Inconclusive? Impossible. Walter had confirmed it. Aaron had confirmed it. This was a lie, manufactured to protect Hale. Her hands trembled as fury surged through her veins. She could stay silent, let the deception stand, let Ethan fade into death. Or she could risk everything, expose herself completely, and speak the truth in front of them all. Her decision was instinct. She stepped forward, her voice cutting through the heavy silence. "That's a lie." Every head turned toward her. Walden's face darkened. "Miss Williams," but she didn't stop. "I saw the reports. I saw the numbers before they were buried. Thallium is in his blood. It's in his skin. And every jar of cream delivered by Jefferson Hale is filled with it. You're not treating him. You're letting him be poisoned under your watch." The room erupted in gasps and murmurs. Ethan's sister rose to her feet, her face pale with shock. Hale himself, standing near the corner, did not flinch. He only smiled faintly as though amused. Walden's voice thundered, "Enough! You are out of line. Guards, remove her." Two security officers moved toward her, but Maya raised her voice, louder, fiercer. "If you take me out, you take the truth with me. But remember this, Ethan's body is proof. Test it again, honestly this time, and you'll see what I've seen. You can silence me, but you cannot silence the truth in his blood." The guards hesitated, uncertain. The family members exchanged anxious glances. The younger doctors looked shaken, torn between loyalty to authority and the undeniable conviction in Maya's words. For the first time, cracks spread through the fortress of arrogance. Walden barked again for order, but the damage had been done. The seed of truth had been planted publicly, where it could not be buried so easily. As the guards escorted her out, Hale's eyes met hers. His smile was calm, but beneath it lay a warning as clear as thunder. "You've made yourself my enemy." Maya walked with her head high, fear burning in her chest, but resolve stronger still. The battle was no longer in whispers. It was out in the open now, and she was ready to fight it to the end. The rise from shadows, the morning after Maya's public stand, the mansion's atmosphere had shifted completely. Whispers filled the corridors, and no one seemed to move with the same practiced ease as before. The fortress of arrogance that had shielded the doctors was cracking, though they fought desperately to hold it together. The words Maya had shouted still echoed in their ears, echoing even louder in the hearts of the nurses and staff who had watched quietly from the sidelines. For years, they had lived in a hierarchy where voices like hers were invisible, but now the invisible had spoken, and the truth was impossible to ignore. Ethan Cross's family, once deferential to the doctor's authority, had grown restless. His sister, pale with worry, demanded answers. His nephew, who had inherited a fraction of his uncle's fiery spirit, asked bluntly why toxicology had not been conducted sooner. And though Dr. Walden continued to insist that Maya's words were baseless, his voice lacked the iron certainty it once carried. Every doctor in that room had seen the same thing: her conviction, her courage, and the cracks in their own explanations. Doubt, once dismissed, now festered openly. But if the truth was beginning to gain ground, the danger around Maya multiplied. That afternoon, she found herself summoned to the mansion's security office. Two men in dark suits stood waiting, their expressions unreadable. They informed her curtly that her employment was being reviewed due to breaches of protocol. In simpler words, she was being fired. Maya listened quietly, her heart sinking, but she refused to bow. She signed the papers they pushed toward. Her then met their eyes with unwavering resolve. "You can strip me of my job," she said, her voice calm, "but you cannot strip me of the truth. Ethan Cross is being poisoned, and whether you like it or not, that truth will come out." They dismissed her with cold efficiency, expecting her to leave broken. Instead, she left with fire in her chest. She drove straight to Walter's lab, where he confirmed again what she already knew. "The second jar," he said gravely, "contains thallium levels consistent with poisoning. This isn't speculation, Maya. This is attempted murder." He handed her a sealed envelope containing the report. "Take this to the family directly. They may not believe you, but they deserve to see the evidence with their own eyes." That night, rain lashed against the mansion as Maya stood at the gates, denied entry by guards. But fate has its own way of opening doors. Ethan's sister arrived in her car at that very moment, her face pale with exhaustion. Maya stepped forward, her voice urgent. "Please, just read this. If you want your brother to live, you need to see what they've been hiding." Suspicion clouded the woman's face, but something in Maya's eyes, the desperation, the sincerity, made her pause. She took the envelope silently, then disappeared into the house. The next morning, chaos erupted. Ethan's family confronted the medical team with Walter's report, demanding immediate retesting under independent supervision. Walden tried to maintain control, but the fortress of authority collapsed in an instant. An outside toxicologist was brought in, and within hours the results were undeniable. Ethan's blood contained dangerous levels of thallium. Poison, not disease, was killing him. The revelation swept through the mansion like wildfire, shattering the illusions the doctors had clung to. Ethan's family ordered immediate chelation therapy, bypassing the team that had failed him. For the first time in weeks, hope stirred, but while truth had finally surfaced, danger had not passed. Jefferson Hale, cornered, revealed the depths of his ruthlessness. When the news broke, he did not flinch. Instead, he approached Maya in the staff parking lot, his composure unnervingly intact. "You should have stayed silent," he said softly, rain dripping from his immaculate suit. "Do you think this changes anything? Men like me don't fall because a housekeeper whispers too loudly." Maya met his gaze, unshaken. "Men like you always think that, until the day the truth finally drowns you." His smile was thin, sharp. "Be careful." Weeks later, Ethan Cross himself visited her home. Gone was the towering billionaire whose voice commanded industries. In his place stood a man humbled, his strength returning slowly but his gratitude immense. He thanked her quietly, without fanfare, but with sincerity deeper than wealth. "I thought I was surrounded by the best," he admitted, "but it was you, unseen and unheard, who saw what they missed. You reminded me that greatness can come from anywhere." Maya smiled, her eyes misting as Leah peeked shyly from behind her. "Truth doesn't need a title to be right," she said softly, echoing her father's words one last time. And so the story closed not with the roar of applause, but with the quiet triumph of a woman who rose from shadows, who defied fear, who saved a life when all others failed. A story of courage, persistence, and the power of voices the world too often overlooks.